This is my interview project for Mrs. Miller's 7th period science class. This is my grandma. I'm going to interview Dora Sorensen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you questions like when you were born, and like how it was like when you were born, and to see how technology changed over time. And feel free to refuse to answer any of the questions if you don't need to.
You can refuse.
Answer them. And
It's against my First Amendment.
yeah, let's start.
Ouch.
That's about the third time that bitch.
Okay. Go ahead.
Sure.
What year were you born?
Well, I was born in 1932.
Were you born in a city or a country?
Well, it was in the country, way far into the country.
Was there a doctor present when you were born?
There really wasn't. My mother actually, there wasn't even a midwife. It was the neighbors that would come and be with my mother whenever we were born. You know, as children. She was when I was born, too.
Cool. Did you have brothers or sisters?
Yes, I had 2 brothers. Well, I had 3 brothers, and one brother died when he was only 9 days old. So I grew up with 2 brothers and 4 sisters.
Okay. Were you the youngest, oldest, or in the middle?
No, I was the 5th one down the line, so I was just a little bit below the middle.
Yeah. When you were young, did you have any animals?
Oh yes, we had a lot of animals because we lived on a farm, and so we really had all. Well, that's all. We really had all kinds of animals.
Just move on the mouse
Which
pad a little bit.
kinds?
Well, there were cows, which we had cows that were milk cows. Actually, we used them for our benefit of our livelihood, and we had horses and pigs and chickens. So we really had everything that we needed, mainly the animals for our food and things like that. We raised for our food, and then we always had a dog on the farm. It was always a dog.
Was it difficult to take care of them?
Not really so difficult. It was a little bit time consuming, and of course it kept us quite busy because there was a lot of chores and a lot of things to do with these animals.
Alright. What did you and your families do for recreation?
Well, our recreation, this is where the creativity came in, because we kind of made up our own games, a lot of our own games. We played games together, a lot of in-the-house games, like dominoes, and we played hide and seek and a lot of games like that were really fun games.
Did you ever pick on your brothers and sisters?
You know what? I was always really very good.
Right. Okay.
We had a fun time together, and yes, I was always accused of being quite a teaser.
Yeah.
I really was. I had a lot of fun.
Did you have money to spend when you were young? Did you have money to spend when you were young?
You know what? I really didn't, because of the fact there were no stores around in the area where we were in the country, and when we did go into town, we usually went in only really once a week to get the groceries and things that my father needed, but really we were able to maintain all that we needed just right there on the farm. So we didn't go into town very often, and I really didn't go into town very many times. I mean, sometimes we would go with our parents, but not too often. I was able to buy an ice cream cone when we took our cream into the creamery, and do you know what? We had the best ice cream cones, and it cost me a nickel.
A nickel?
A nickel.
That's pretty cool. Okay, how did you get your money? Well, I guess you already answered that. Okay, what kinds of foods did your family eat most of the time?
We just kind of ate things that we raised on the farm. We had our own butter, my mother made cheese, and so we had our cheese. We had a fruit orchard. We canned our fruit, and so we had a lot of fruit. We had the chickens, we had our eggs. My mother baked the bread. We raised the wheat, and we always had a big garden. And so from the garden and from the fresh fruit and so on, we really maintained ourselves. We did a lot of canning, and there's ways that you can preserve eggs. I don't know if you know that or not, but there is ways you can preserve them and keep them so that you can have some eggs in the wintertime. And milk, too.
What did you eat for snacks?
You know what? We didn't even know what snacks were. I think, really, we didn't.
Did you eat between meals?
We really didn't eat between meals. We didn't have things like that. Probably more than likely we were hungry. We had some bread and butter and jam, you know, and things like that, but we really didn't have a lot of snack food and things like that.
Okay, when did you have your first fast food, like a hamburger or soda? Do you remember?
Where'd you get these questions? Did you make them up?
They're off an approved list. Remember, you can refuse. You can say, I choose not to answer.
I think I was so old at that time when I finally had my first hamburger that you would be amazed, but probably when I was in high school.
Yeah.
Did you have a soda with it, or did you have...
Probably had a soda with it when we were in high school, and we would go once in a while as groups or things like that to different things. Yeah, we would have sodas and hamburger, something like that. But it was nothing like it is now. You know what I mean? It was there just wasn't that many fast food places really.
Yeah. How did your family travel when you were a child?
We had cars as I became older. We had a car, and so we did travel on the vehicles of the cars. The beginning one was the old Model T Ford, if you can imagine, and I don't remember it too well because I was quite young.
So,
but we had transportation in cars.
So when you were first married, you drove in cars?
Yes, and that's when when I got my driver's license. Actually, did you know that when I got my driver's license, I was 20 years old?
Did you have to be that, or is it?
No, it wasn't that I had to be that. It's just that I hadn't driven in the city. I did drive on the farm, and I drove the tractors, and I drove the vehicles in the country, but I didn't have driver's license.
Yeah.
But I did get my driver's license when I was 20.
Okay. Hold on a second, Cory. Okay.
All right. So, when did you get your first ride in an automobile?
My first ride in an automobile, I really can't remember. I was really quite young. I think probably when I was maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years old, something like that. I really don't remember my first ride in the automobile.
So you already explained when you got your license. When was your first time in a train or a plane?
You know, actually, the first time I rode in a train was when I was in Switzerland. And then I did ride on the train and rode up into the Alps there. And that would have been about in 87.
You didn't ride trains when you were young? Well, there were no trains out there.
No. And the first airplane that I actually rode in an airplane, well, I must say that whenever I was in high school, my sister's husband had a brother that had one of these small planes, just one of these two-seater planes. And once in a while he used to take us up in it, and it was really not a very good experience because it made you really quite ill. And so actually I can say that the first ride I had in a plane was when I was in high school, so probably around 14, 15 years old, but not a big plane.
At what age did you get married?
20.
20? How much exercise did you get at various stages of your life?
Well, I think I've always been fairly active, and I've always had quite a bit of exercise because of the fact that when I was on the farm we always worked in the fields, and we had a lot of chores to do, and we just had a lot of exercise. So I can say that I probably have had a lot of exercise all my life. And then, you know, after getting married and the children and the family, there's a lot of exercise involved, and that's something I still enjoy doing.
What epidemics have you seen during your life?
Epidemics, like
Illness, any kind of epidemics.
Now, are you meaning ones that I have had or ones that I have seen as a general thing?
Either.
Did you know, actually,
Smallpox.
as I was growing up,
Polio.
there were not very many mumps, smallpox, measles, and things into the little country school that I was. We never really had a lot of that. I would say that we consider that perhaps an epidemic. We didn't have that. When I was in college, believe it or not, and I was 18 years old, I got the mumps. And that's the only childhood disease I've ever had.
So it all spread around more in the city?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I would. When I was in college, that was when there was more of the population, you know, I mean, around more people and so on like that. And I don't know if that specifically had an effect or not. But in going to school in the grade school where we did, in the small country school, there never really were measles, mumps, and chicken pox. We never seemed to have it.
What about polio?
No.
No
No
polio. What are the best memories when you were young?
Best memories when I was young?
Yeah.
Well, we always had fun together as brothers and sisters, and I think some of the best memories are just working together, playing together, and just having a fun time together as a family. We had a lot of fun things that we did. We always worked quite hard, but you know, it wasn't work to us. Work was kind of fun, you know what I mean? And we worked in the fields, and we just did things, you know what I mean, together. Always enjoyed each other, and like I said, we would come home from the fields in the evenings and so on, and always found some games or some type of game or something to play, and we always had just a lot of fun with each other. Of course, always competing.
And what were some of your best memories now?
Best memories now?
Yeah.
I think the best memories that I have now, actually, of course, is of my children and the grandchildren. And now there's some great-grandchildren coming. There's nothing more fun and exciting, I think, to me, than small children and little children and babies and so on coming into the family, watching them grow and progress and things like that. To me, that is fun. I've always loved children, and I enjoy being with them and working with them. I really do.
How is Christmas, Easter, other religious holidays, birthdays, and summer vacations celebrated differently when you were a child and when your children were young?
Well, it was quite different when I was a child. Now, Christmas was something that we remembered, but you know, as far as Halloween and a few of the holidays like this is something, you know, I really didn't know anything much about Halloween. We never really observed it at all, and I think that my parents coming from Europe, you know, as they did, perhaps it wasn't a holiday there at all, and we really didn't. Christmas was always a fun time, and one of the funnest things that we did as Christmas is that we went as children, we could always pick our Christmas tree. And that is when we always had horses, and there would be a horse that would pull what we call the slip, which actually is like two runners with a flat top on it, sometimes just a smooth log. And they would pull that behind the horse, and we would go into the mountains and then, you know, find our tree. And the girls, we would get to ride on the slip as it was being pulled along. And I still remember, you know, the horse. Of course, if my brothers would run the horse, then it'd kick the snow all up into your face because we had to lay down and we had to hang on. But that was a fun thing that we did, because as we walked to school, I'm talking too long, but as we walked to school, we had to walk a couple of miles, and we always went through a timber area. And so the fun thing to do, kind of as we walked to school, and especially later on into the years, we would, all of us would pick out a tree that we thought would be the best Christmas tree. Yeah. And then we would go look at it and see, and then we always would want ours to be selected. But anyway, it was a fun time. And Easter time was a fun time, but as far as the eggs and things concerned, we did color a few eggs. It wasn't a lot of you know, things like that. We always went on a hike early in the springs, and there where I lived out into the country, it was a fun thing to hike to the canyons because there were a lot of Indian ruins and things like that. And that was one of the enjoyable things that we did. And we always took a spring hike, we would call it, kind of like a May walk or something like that, but that was in the spring of the year.
What was your school like?
Well, did you know, actually in the country school, the one-room schoolhouse that we had in the country school, which we went to the 8th grade, and it was just the one big one-room country schoolhouse, and there was what we call now the little pot-bellied stove on the one end of the room, which we would build a fire in. And the smaller grades, the first grade row of the first graders would be next to the stove, and then as you got to the 8th grade, they had to sit close to the door to the outside, which was the cooler area. But we were all 8 grades were in there, and we had a wonderful teacher that actually came, Mrs. Tucker, that came from the east. She was a wonderful teacher, and she would come out there into that country and teach us all winter long, and then she would go back to in Kentucky, is where she was from, and she would go back into the summer times and come back into the winter time, and she was a wonderful teacher. She really did help the children learn.
So
she was great.
Did she teach like all the grades at the same time?
She did. We all had our time. We had our time that we did what we needed to do, and the others had to do their lessons. She was very well organized. She loved the children. There weren't a lot of us. What I mean, probably when I went there, probably around 20, you see, and all of the grades. And so she was able to handle this, and it worked out, you know what I mean, really very well. And she really loved the children. She was a little hard of hearing, and she had kind of a hearing aid. You have to edit some of this.
No, you're
But-
fine. You're fine.
She had, and I know we kind of gave her a little bit of a hard time once in a while, but she really did help us to learn. She was a wonderful teacher.
How did you get there? Did you
We walked.
walk?
Yeah, we
You
walked,
already
and
said
we
that.
walked, actually it was 2 miles,
2 miles.
and we walked across the timbers and had our trails and things like that, and we walked every day as a family and, you know, brothers and sisters.
What was your school lunch like?
Well, let me tell you about my school lunch. We did have to pack our lunch, you know what I mean, to school every day, of course, because we didn't have school lunches there. And we had, like I said, we had a lot of fruit on the farm and so on, and my mother would make a lot of times this grape jelly, you know, and then we had the homemade bread, the homemade wheat bread, and we would have these grape jelly sandwiches, and I honestly don't even like a grape jelly sandwich now, because I just did not like it, but we had to have a grape jelly sandwich almost every day, and then we would have a boiled egg and you know, things like that to eat, and it was very filling, and we had fruit, you know, I mean, when the fruit was fresh, and that was kind of mainly what we had to eat in our lunches.
What was your favorite subject?
My favorite subject,
Or subjects?
well, I've kind of enjoyed everything in school. I think I enjoy reading a little more. Math was never too terribly difficult for me. I mean, just not the extensive math, but anyway, I enjoyed school, and I enjoyed most of the subjects always.
So you only had that one teacher?
We had different teachers. She was the one that was there for the most of the years, but then I did have a couple of others. We did have, when she got to where she couldn't come out and teach, she became quite elderly. Then there was we had a man teacher, and that was the first man teacher we ever had, and he was from Monticello, there nearby. And he was Mr. Rasmussen, and he was a good teacher. And then we had, I had about 3 different teachers, I guess, in the different classes whenever I went to school.
Was she your favorite teacher? The first
Mrs. Tucker was,
Yeah.
she was a great teacher.
Who is your favorite president and why?
Of the United States?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I don't know about the favorite one. I guess I like President Reagan, but I like President Bush now too. I think he's doing pretty well, but I think both of them were pretty upfront, forward people, and I've enjoyed them.
What would you say has been the most historical event that has happened during your lifetime?
Historical event. Well, I would say, I don't know if you want to zero in on the war times or whatever, but one of the things that was really quite a concern to me as I was growing up as a child was when there was a Second World War, and that was with Germany. And I didn't know a lot about the war, but I know with my parents being from Europe and whatever, it was quite a concern, and it was a little bit of a frightening time. You know what I mean? And it was just kind of a concern, we're in war, you know what I mean? And things kind of become, you know, the sugar was rationed, so we didn't have a lot of sugar. Gas, you couldn't get much gas, and so it was a time of concern, I think, for me. You know, really.
The Second World War. Tell them where your parents are from. Why you keep referencing that? Tell about that.
Well, my parents are from Switzerland, and they married in Switzerland, and then came to this country in 1924. My father had been over here earlier in America, and had served in the military, and is quite a history there of what he had done. And he was able to purchase some property down in the southern part of Utah, down in San Juan County. And after he was able to purchase this property, he did go back to Europe and married Mother. My mother there in Switzerland, and then they came to the United States and actually came over in 1924. So they were both from Switzerland.
Did you have indoor plumbing when you were young?
Have what?
Indoor plumbing?
Not on your life. No, we didn't. We didn't have indoor plumbing. When I was young, we didn't have indoor plumbing, no. It was a little square box outside with a catalog on the side.
Sears Callaway.
You didn't have running hot water, you just get up from the well?
We didn't have the running hot water at that time. As I became older in the later years, we didn't have running hot water, no. We just had to heat it, and we had the wood stoves, which had what they called a water jacket on the side of the stove there, and it was just a container which was next to where you would build a fire. So you nearly always had a little bit of hot water, because you would keep that full of water, and so you had hot water as you burnt the wood, you know, and lit the stove. But that was the only really hot water that had, other than what you had heated up with the pans.
Did you have electricity?
You know what, I didn't have electricity when I was a girl. We didn't have electricity, and I can't remember exactly the year that the electricity came in. But no, I didn't have electricity as I was younger years when I was growing up. We didn't.
Do you remember like around when you got them? Running water and electricity?
What grades?
Yeah, just like what around?
I think that I was about in 7th grade. It was about in 7th grade, and I'm not so sure that the electricity was there then, but we did have the water coming into the house, because when we built the home that we were in, the bigger home, my father built us a new home when I was in 1st grade, so I was 6 years old, 6 and a half, something like that, during that time. And we had what we called a cistern, and which would get the water into the cistern, you know, I mean, the rainwater and so on. And then that way they were able to get that water piped into the house, and so we did have some running water.
Did you have a radio?
Not in my early years, no, and you know, I can't quite remember. But I must have been close to about 7th, 8th grade or something when we had our first radio. It really and truly was. And it wasn't the children that ran the radio. We didn't use it for music. It was more or less used to listen to the news, and it was more or less something that my father used. And I can always remember listening to Amos and Andy. Now, Amos and Andy was a program that we had, you know, I mean, years ago, and it was always a fun one to listen to.
So your favorite radio show is, what was it called?
Amos and Andy.
Amos and Andy.
And it was just a little, you know, kind of a comedy type thing. And they were fun to listen to.
When did you watch your first television show? Just around whenever.
You know, I don't think I watched the first television show till I was probably around 20 years old. Seems like 20, 21. Really and truly. It would have been when it was. And I don't remember when we got our first television show.
That's the reason my mom didn't think it was good for us to watch TV either.
It was about then, because see, until I got married, we didn't have televisions, and when I was going to college, I think we didn't have any in our apartments or anything. No.
What kinds of books did you have at home?
We just had a regular school books, but you know what? My father did a lot of reading of Zangray books, you know, a lot of some of these Western stories, and then there was Albert R. Lyman that wrote some stories, and he lived in Blanding, nearby where we lived, and he read The Voice of the Intangible, and it was, you know, I mean, and I remember that book. It was really quite a good book, and we were able to read some of these books. There were some of them my father would not allow us to read, but we read, you know, a lot of these books, and I guess more or less they were the Zangray books.
Did you have any favorite books?
Like I said, that was the ones that I had access to. You see what I mean? More like, and we weren't close to a library where we could check books out and things like that. So I would say that these here's novels, you know, and they were mostly Western novels, and so that was really more or less the favorite, I guess, at that time.
Did you have a telephone, or when did you get your first one?
We didn't have a telephone, and we didn't have a telephone out there until after I was actually moved away from home. And actually, you see, I actually attended my high school years in Clovis, New Mexico. That was where my older sister was living, because we were so far out into the country that after the 8 grades there in the grade school, then you either lived with a family in town and went to school, or went somewhere, and my oldest sister was down there, and so I actually went down there and stayed with her and her family in Clovis, near Clovis, New Mexico, and that's where I attended school, and we didn't have a telephone at that time at home.
Name some of the things that you have witnessed that science has brought into your life, and how they have changed your life for better or for worse.
Well, I think a lot of the science technology has been probably the modern, you know, progression of like television and,
Electronics in general.
electronics in general and things like that have brought about just a number of things that have been so much more convenient when I think of it now, to the way that we had it when we were home, even, the running water, the washing machines and so on, because see, when I was small at home, we finally had a washing machine with the wringer on it, I don't know if you know what a wringer is, but it did wash. But then for many years, when I was small, I remember washing on the scrub board. That's the way that we washed, is actually washing on the scrub board, and I remember washing my brother's socks and things like that. And it was on the scrub board, so really the advancement of technology and electronics and so on like that has been tremendous, what it was when I was a child. Of course, in the area where I lived, I'm sure that some of it was available, it just wasn't available in the area where I was, because we were into the country. And so, I don't know if that really answers a lot of it.
What did your family do with their trash when you were young?
Do you know what? We had a big barrel outside, and we were allowed to put the trash in there, and then we had to burn it, and that's what we did. And then whenever there were like cans or things like that, which we had very few cans, then there was a dump down into a certain part of the canyon area where you could take this and dump it, like the garbage dump.
And glass bottles.
And glass bottles and so on. That's where we actually dump, these things. They come to the bottom.
About how much trash did you have each week?
Not very much. Not very much. There just wasn't a lot of disposable things at that time, and there wasn't a lot of trash.
Did you ever worry about the environment as a child?
Not really. I wasn't that aware of the problems that there would be in the environment. I don't think I really did worry that much about the environment.
When you went to the store, how did you transport your purchase back to your house?
In a cart. We actually went in a vehicle and then carried them into the house. We did with a vehicle, yeah. We were about 14, 15 miles from the store.
Did you ever recycle before 1970?
Do what?
Did you ever recycle before 1970?
No.
No. Are you happy about your life so far?
Yes. Yes, I am.
If you could, what would you change?
What would I change in my life? You know what? Everything that has taken place in my life, I think, has been an experience, and it has been a good growing experience. And I don't know if I would change anything because I think that it has been a growing thing for me, and so I'm satisfied with the way that life has, and I think that it will continue to have challenges and so on as it goes along, and that's actually what promotes growth, and I enjoy it.
Have you been a goal setter?
I think so. I feel like that I have.
How has it helped you?
It has helped me in many ways. I think that it helps you to be a little bit organized and more focused if you set goals, and I think that it just gives a little more purpose in things, and it's a growing experience of confidence within myself if I set a goal and then strive to achieve it.
What obstacles or setbacks in life did you have to deal with?
Obstacles?
Obstacles or setbacks?
It's kind of I don't know. There's been really a lot of them that I've had to harsh things that I've had to deal with. Particularly, there's all
your father.
It's true.
The death of your father.
That's right. Whenever I was 18 years old, my father passed away quite suddenly. He really wasn't very old. He was only 54 years old, and that really was that was kind of a setback to me, because in a way it was kind of devastating. Always growing up, it seemed like that nothing could happen to my parents, or there was nothing that my parents couldn't do.
Yeah.
It's just the way that I felt. And this was really a little bit difficult, and it was a little bit of a difficult time for our family because we had this farm, and you see at that time my mother didn't have her citizenship papers either of the United States. She didn't have to have her citizenship papers, and she wasn't automatically become a citizen because of her husband being a citizen. So she needed to go get her citizenship papers. And so she did, she did do this. So it was quite a changing time in our lives, but things did continue on, and due to good neighbors and so on like that, the farm continued, and things went on. And so that was a challenge, I guess, just losing my father, and then when I was younger.
What scientist or scientific invention has had the most impact on our present lifestyle?
On our present,
Yeah.
What scientist or scientific invention?
Well, like computers, I don't know, TV,
Just, go ahead and say it again.
any like electronic.
inventions that had most impact in our lives, I think definitely, you take computers, you take the atom, the understanding of atoms, the atoms in the atmosphere. So
Nuclear energy and nuclear.
nuclear energy and things like that has produced a lot of different technology and things that has been tremendous. There's been a lot of growth and advancement. When I look back at the amount of advancement that seemed to be the first, say, 20 years of my life, and then the rest of my life, the other years, it's been just phenomenal at the increase in technology and things that have come about in the last 20 years of my life, past 20 years.
Are you comfortable using a computer?
You know what? Not because I don't understand them.
Yeah, you were
But
talking about earlier how you needed a lesson.
Yeah, I don't really understand the computer. I do think they're fascinating, and I don't think they're as complicated as I try to think that they are. It's just because I didn't start out on ground level. But I am going to take some classes on it and learn it just a little better, and learn at least the basics eventually. But I'm sure it's a wonderful thing.
Which technological items are responsible for the most dramatic change in your lifestyle through the years?
The change in my lifestyle through the years. Well, I don't know. I guess probably television. I don't know. It doesn't bother me too much because I don't watch it much. I won't answer that one. I don't know how to answer that one.
Yeah.
You think communications? You think television and communication and all that? You think that's had a heavy impact?
Telephone.
Satellite, telephone?
Definitely. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, go ahead.
What advice would you give a current 7th or 8th grade student?
The advice I would give a 7th or 8th grade student?
Yeah.
Like him.
Yeah, my age.
Well, I think that you just have to listen to your feelings and the feelings that you have in thinking things. That you'll have many challenges and different opportunities that will come to you. And there's much technology and many things that can give different viewpoints and ideas to you, but you will have to think it through yourself and feel good about it, and then make your decisions, because you can't just kind of go with the flow or whatever. You need to be capable and realize that you are capable of doing this, of listening to the guidance that you receive and follow that. And you will know what you actually feel good about and what you don't, and follow that.
If you could leave your mark on the earth, what would it be? Like any mark.
I think of being kind to your fellow man and being helpful to others. I think to me, that's the best thing you can do.
In the early part of your life, how is food prepared? What type of stove was it cooked on?
We just had, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, we raised a lot of our food, the gardens and the things like that. And really, in the very early part of my life, we had wood-burning stoves. And so the bread baking and the cooking of the food was done on the stoves. And it was with a wood-burning stove.
Okay, that's all the questions. Thank you for your time.
Okay, Cory. So go ahead and conclude.
It's Cory Sorensen, and I don't know. This is my science interview.
Alright.
This is my grandpa, Fukan Sorensen, and I'm gonna ask him like 10 questions. So, yeah. Okay, Grandpa. What year were you born?
1924.
Were you born in a city or a country?
Out in the country.
Was there a doctor present when you were born?
That's a good question. I rather think not.
When were you young? When you were young, did you live with animals?
Did I what?
When you were young, did you have animals?
Yes, sir. I had lots of animals.
What kinds?
We had horses, cows, chickens, sheep, pigs, mostly, and dogs.
Did you help take care of them?
Yes, sir. I did.
Was it difficult?
No, I don't think so. I think it was probably fun.
What epidemics have you seen during your life?
Epidemics.
Illnesses, things.
Just want the keys.
I think we had a lot of mumps and measles and chicken pox
Polio?
and polio.
Smallpox? Was there?
I can't remember much about the smallpox part. I remember they used to give us all shots, and those who got it had that mark upon their arm where they give you the shot, but I can't remember. We've been trying to figure out whether we had it or not. I mean, the shots.
What?
But my mother and that kept a record of this in the Bible, in our family Bible, and my oldest brother, when my parents died, he has the Bible, and as far as I know, that's where the record is.
What years were there most illnesses?
Oh, I don't know, sweetheart. My memory's kind of that.
Any particular grade or anything like
I
that?
would imagine they were back in the 1930s, in the latter part of the 30s and early 40s.
What was your school like?
When I went to grade school, I had we had a school room that had a building that had 4 rooms in it, but 2 of them were vacated, and they only used 2 rooms, and they used 2 teachers. And the one teacher had the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, and the other would have the 4th, 5th, and the 6th. You'd have maybe 2 or 3 people on one row that'd be 4th graders, 2 or 3 on the other would be 5th graders, and the other row would have 6th graders. There was probably maybe up to most 15 kids in one classroom.
How far did you have to travel to get to school?
When I was in grade school, I walked to school, and I could usually stand up in the school and see my home.
What was your school lunch like?
Whatever you brought from home, or else I'd run home and get a sandwich.
Yeah.
I had the occasion at one time when I lived that I'd carry a sandwich, and we had, especially in the time when the cows were in the pasture, I had a riding horse, and I'd tie it up to a post in the schoolyard, and when I'd be lunch period, I'd run out and jump on the horse and eat my sandwich while I was riding, and go down to the river and water my parents' cows, then come back and tie my horse up, and that's where I spent my lunch period, is riding the horse down to water the cows.
Who was your favorite president and why?
My favorite president of the nation? I don't know. I like Nixon, and I don't know, I like Kennedy, really, and I like the president we got now. Reagan was very, very good. I like the president we have now.
What would you say has been the most historical event that has happened during your lifetime?
Most historical? Probably the biggest thing I had was the war, breaking out of the war. And I got on a merchant ship, and one of the most thing I was able to be the coxswain, or the one that was on the wheel, to steer the big express vessel up the Columbia River to Portland and back out. And then I think that, and I was also anchored in Washington, or up in Seattle one time, and I was on night watch. When I could smell smoke, we'd had longshoremen working on the boat, and that night I could smell smoke, and I called the city fire department and came back, and it had gone on fire down in the hold, and I got quite a not a citation, but commendation from the fire department of saving the ship. And then I think another thing is I've met most of the general authorities in the church.
Did you have indoor plumbing when you were young?
No.
Did you have running water?
Probably running water, yes. We also, in the first homes I can remember, we had to bring the water in from outside in a tap, and the outhouse was probably 150 yards away, and it was a three-holer.
Did you have electricity?
Yes, I think I've always had electricity in my home.
Did you have a radio?
The first radio I ever knew was, I can't remember what they used to call them. It was made in a matchbox. And my cousin up in Salt Lake built it and brought it down and showed me the radio, and I remember how excited I was to hear somebody talking in the air. And then finally my parents bought an Water Kent radio, and we'd get to listen to Little Orphan Annie and Tailspin Tommy and a few things in the afternoon. And we had a big porch, and some of the neighbors would come at night and come over there and listen to the news. And I think we was probably about the third or fourth family that ever had a full radio in the town.
What was your favorite radio show?
I don't know now. I like, what is it, Bonanza?
Mm-hmm.
I think that, and Little House on the Prairie.
Do you remember when your first time was when you watched your first television show?
Not exactly. It was probably one of the first television shows that I can remember was, I was on a mission out in Iowa City, Iowa, when we were tracting, and we'd go to homes, and people were watching some kind of a silly thing, and they called them televisions. And once in a while we'd walk in and happen to get to see what was going on. That would be about 1949.
What did your family do with their trash when you were young?
What do we do with the trash? We probably either buried or hauled it up to the mountain and put it in a wash in the mountain where the rest of the city did. They called them trash piles. dumps.
About how much trash did you have each week?
Hard to say, pal. Not very much, really.
Did you ever worry about the environment as a child?
Pardon?
Did you ever worry about the environment, like care if it was trash or...
No, I think we just took it with the trend of life and that knew that somebody was going to have some waste and some other kind of waste, so there wouldn't be much because they would burn a good share of it probably in a barrel or anything like that.
When you went to the store, how did you transport your purchase back to your house?
The biggest, when I was a small kid, I was sent to the store several times, maybe with a dozen eggs. And we'd maybe trade the eggs to the store for, they were worth about maybe 2 or 3 cents a piece. And we'd hand in the eggs to the store clerk, and then we'd purchase the things, and they'd keep track of what we brought in and what we purchased.
How did you get the stuff home?
Oh, we usually had to just walk it, carry it in hand.
Did you ever recycle before 1970?
Recycle?
Yeah.
No, I hadn't heard of such a thing.
Alright, thank you for your time and your answers.
Thank you.
Cory Sorensen finishing my science interview.